my guest is Erin Fleming. Now, Erin came to my attention because she was doing the most outrageous challenge I'd seen. 100 days of posting her work, and she was cranking out designs daily. And I messaged her and I was like, this is so cool. Can you come on the podcast? And she was like, I'm not going to come on the podcast until I've done my 100 days. And she's been working really hard to get those out. And from this challenge, she's gained almost 1,000 followers on Twitter. She's got a freelance client, and she's gained a few friends along the way. She's building Storefront.design, the best digital storefronts on the internet, period, which I love in the little bio of her Twitter. And she's had a fascinating story, as you're about to hear. She left corporate finance to become a digital designer. But have there been some bumps in the road? Of course there have. The first failure that we'll talk about is relying only on her partner for feedback on her designs instead of putting her work out there, starting a design and development portfolio with her partner, and expecting things to fall into place and clients to walk in the door. And third one is pivoting the studio to be development only and giving up on designing. So, Erin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It is an honor to have you here after your 100 design journey. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've still got about 10 days left, so almost finished it, but it's kind of a funny story behind it. When I started posting on Twitter, because I was completely new to Twitter, my partner was giving me some advice around how I can grow my account quite quickly, and he said, design challenges work really well, so why don't you give that a try? And in one of the posts, he told me to write something about, excited to see how the next X amount of days go. And then from there, people interpreted that I was doing a 100-day design challenge. I had no intentions to do 100 days. I'd only wanted to do 30. So now, me being quite stubborn and hate giving up on things, I'm committed to this 100-day challenge and never asking him for advice again.
Wait, so you didn't even mean to do 100 days?
No, absolutely not.
Oh my God, that's so stressful, because you must have been like, whoa, guys, no, it's not 100 days. But then it's kind of like too late, because I guess loads of people were emotionally invested in your journey.
Yeah, and I'm a stickler for, sticking to habits and sticking to these kind of things. So there's no way I was just going to give up. But yeah, I was not really impressed when I saw some posts and like newsletters and that kind of thing about me doing a 100-day design challenge. I was like, no way is this happening. But yeah, so here we are, day 90.
What an incredibly effective way for you to kind of burst onto the scene in the Twitter design space, though. Like, it's crazy how much engagement your posts have been getting.
Yeah, I was quite surprised about how quickly it happened, and it's been quite cool to see, I guess, learning how Twitter works. But I do just post and basically get off the app. I don't try to spend too much time on there, if I'm honest. But I have learned a lot from doing the challenge in terms of, quick iterations and that sort of thing. So it's definitely been worthwhile. But I won't be doing another one for a while after this.
I love the honesty. You're just like, no, it's been horrible. But I guess, like, in terms of what did you set out to achieve when you started posting? I mean, was it to get freelance work?
I didn't really have a super clear goal in mind, but it was to get better and get faster were the main goals. And I didn't feel ready yet, I guess, for picking up freelance work, which is probably just a cop-out. But it was within my 60-day plan also to get into some sort of arrangement where I can have like a mentor, take on free work, that sort of thing. I wasn't expecting to go into freelancing so quickly, if I'm being honest, but I'm glad it's happened that way.
Okay, so let's backtrack for anyone that doesn't know the backstory, because in your Twitter bio, it says that you left corporate finance to pursue digital design. And give us a little bit of a flavor of how you came to posting as much as you have on Twitter and why you want to learn design so much.
So design's always been something I'm quite curious about. Even at school, graphic design was something that I spent the most time actually learning and putting effort into in my schoolwork. And then photography also is a massive part of my, I guess, adult years, something I love. Um, so I always had a bit of an idea that I wanted to work somewhere in the design or creative space. And with, I guess, my adult years, my partner and I always had the dream of working overseas and living overseas, things being fully remote, that kind of thing, and looking for ways that I could earn a living whilst being on working from anywhere in the world. Web design was something that obviously ticks those boxes. So I think in maybe like 4 years ago, I did a graphic design course for like 3 months, and I started doing it, realized quickly I was like, oh, this is boring, and I don't want to be learning this as well as working full time. So I bagged that idea and just put it away, and eventually somehow I ended up in corporate finance working for an investment firm and in sales. So meeting with financial advisors and teaching people how to, give advice around investments, and it's something I am quite interested in. So it wasn't completely awful, but it was about 2 years into that, my company did a restructure, and essentially the opportunity of applying for the new role was there or taking the redundancy. And it was definitely a pivotal moment because it was deciding, okay, whether or not I wanted to try something new and pursue design and my creative side, or take the safe, comfortable option of a cushy salary, bonuses, safe work. And I booked flights that same day to Bali with my partner, with one-way ticket. And that was mid 2022. And then I left my company and moved overseas and started learning design.
What? Okay, wait, backtrack. So, I mean, your partner is a developer, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so, I mean, was it kind of a joint decision that you were like, you know what, I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna focus on design with the intention to potentially, work together? Or was it just like, no, I just want to learn design and who knows where it will go?
It was, I guess, towards the line of working together in some way or another, but not necessarily, that wasn't the first initial goal. So a bit of context around that, he was working for an agency in Auckland where we were living in New Zealand. And a couple months before all of this happened, he quit his job and I was the breadwinner, I guess you could say, while he picked up freelancing work and started working on his own personal business online. Web3 was a massive part of that. So it was always in the plan for me to leave my job at some point, take time to figure out what I wanted to do and what career path I wanted to sort of push towards. That was obviously brought forward quite quickly with this opportunity to leave my job. And that's when I'd say we decided that, okay, definitely not going to stay at this job that I'm not happy with. And web design, I just have to start something. I have to start somewhere and see if I like it, start learning it, commit to learning it for X amount of time. And basically I started learning it online through YouTube and some short courses, and I really enjoyed it. So I just didn't stop, and it made it quite easy.
Okay, wait, I've got so many questions here. So, I mean, you basically worked in, was it sales, did you say, in this corporate finance?
Yeah.
Was it an advising role? Was that what you said? Sorry,
It's like new business. So I was working as a business development manager. So I had a network of about 100, 120 financial advisors. And essentially, I would teach them how to give advice, and they would use the investment products that we had in-house, if that makes sense. So,
okay. Yeah, that does make sense. I was just trying to work out like how much like transferable skills were there between design and that, but it doesn't sound like they were that linked at all. I would say though that
sorry, you go.
Sorry, you go.
I was going to say the closest thing that had like the interlink was that at one point we'd redesigned one of our softwares, and it was like an advice tool. So you'd take a client through a journey, or the advisor would take a client through a journey of the advice process, and it was very interactive online. And when we were looking at the design of that, we had to play around, how it would look, how it should feel. And that's when I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. People do this as a job. This is way better than what I'm doing.
Okay, so you kind of like saw the light. You were like, hold on, I know how to do this sales advising, talking the world of finance, but actually the thing that I'd really enjoy is to maybe think about websites and UI UX and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, now I understand that. So then why barley?
So Bali was essentially a place that we'd been to in the past, and everyone who goes there is like, oh, there's all these people living here and working here and digital nomad life. It must be quite easy to do that. So it's also quite cheap, and we knew that I wasn't going to be earning any money while I was learning, and it seemed like a good fit. So essentially, it was we were kind of like, okay, well, we need to book and do something. We need to commit to something because I'm very bad at changing my mind all the time. So we just found cheap flights to Bali for, I think it was about 8 months' time, and booked them. And we're like, well, worst case scenario, we just go for a holiday. But let's prepare to potentially live there for 6 months, and then see, got through the visa process and everything, and it just seemed like a good idea. It also helped that Will's dad has a spa there, so there was family link in a way, which was quite nice, a little bit less scary, although we didn't see anybody for 6 months.
That's a win. I'd fly to a spa in Bali. Okay, so we've now got the scene set. You're learning design. You've started this design challenge in Bali because you're like, you know what, let's put my designs out there to the world. It's going to be a really good process of basically sharing your work. You're going to get feedback from the design community, I imagine. You were maybe thinking, maybe it will turn into work, but that's not an issue if it doesn't. It's just actively sharing, connecting with other people in the community. Maybe things will happen from there. Where does Storefront.design come in?
So initially with the studio that we were starting, it was going to be centered around e-commerce. Quickly realized that those projects are huge. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into them, and takes a lot to be able to be really, really good at that. When we were looking at the e-commerce space, we realized that there's so many badly designed e-commerce sites, and a lot of them lack a lot of, love and difference. So Storefront was basically a way for us to collate inspiration of unique sites and have it displayed in a way that's also easy to filter through. So the filtering system was something that we really put a lot of effort into to make it easier to niche down on specific attributes to a site. But yeah, it was just a really good way for us to showcase or keep track of all the sites that we really liked for inspiration, and wanted to make it a bit different.
It sounds a lot like I don't know if you've seen One Page Love with Rob Hope, where he basically collected all these web pages when essentially there weren't necessarily inspiration websites for loads of people out there now like today, but Rob Hope did this over 10 years ago, and he basically took screen grabs of these, or screenshots of all these different websites, put them in this inspiration gallery, which was mainly to show his clients hey, do you want something like this? Do you want something like this? Because they were giving him Word documents of I'd like a colorful, and you're just like, well, that's not very helpful. And anyway, that obviously got a lot of traffic, and now he's stopped freelancing and is mainly focusing on that. So I think it's a really smart move to potentially create something that you find helpful. And if you find helpful, that you've already kind of found a user group of UI UX designers that are doing e-commerce websites. I think it's really, really smart. Who knows where it could go?
Yeah, it's a big discussion.
Ooh, okay, juicy.
Yeah.
Well, let's before we start talking about that, because I feel like we might be encroaching on the fails that we'll talk about today. So just to be clear then, you're freelancing as of now. Is freelancing your love and true passion and what you want to do for the rest of your life, or where are you at?
So I'm pretty bad at saying when I was younger, I'll never do one job for the rest of my life. And I don't love anything that much, but design in some form is definitely what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. I'm not too sure if it's going to be freelancing, probably not. My goals for the next 6 months to a year is to work with people in either in a freelancing arrangement or working in an agency full time or studio full time so that I can learn from people who are far better than me. Freelancing has been really good for that, but it is super helpful. I'm learning now to have feedback from other people who can hover over my work and pick out the flaws and tell me ways to improve things, instead of relying on myself solely all the time when I'm still so new to this.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think a lot of people in the Webflow space generally like start, because the barrier to entry to just, you know, start making websites, start doing design, start, you know, creating is low. You kind of think, well, you know, I'll just take a course and then I'll just jump in and go for it. But actually, I think when you actually do projects, there's so much to it, isn't there? Like, okay, invoicing, and I've got to guide the client through a process. Okay, what process am I doing? And the process that you might have learned from the course isn't quite fit. And then you're like, wait, I'm just trying to, like, you know, get them through to the next process without really knowing if I'm doing it right. And it's, yeah, kind of a hard thing to do and manage all on your own, I think. And it's super helpful when you work for an agency that's already got systems and processes down, and you can watch them in a sales call and be like, oh, that's interesting that they spoke about the project like that, or whatever it is. So highly recommended.
Absolutely. And I think with that as well, is I really don't like being bad at things. So the less mistakes I can make, like obvious mistakes I can make, super helpful to have people to point them out before I get so deep into something that, you know, I see right past the major flaws.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also, like, when you do client projects without fully being in command of the process that you're guiding the client through, then the client starts to lose trust with you, and then they basically become like a pixel pusher, but both of you are just kind of annoyed at each other, and it's like a kind of a failed marriage. I found. Not sure if that's the right phrase, but does that resonate? I don't know if you've done freelance work so far and you're just like trying to get it done, but you're not particularly happy doing it.
Well, I think what I'm struggling with at the moment is figuring out how much authority I need to show to a client when I'm in a freelancing situation. So when you lack evidence that you're good at something, it's really hard to have the confidence to be like, oh no, it needs to be done this way, or this is the best way, this is not going to work. So that sort of confidence I'm definitely lacking from not having as much experience, and it does probably make the experience for both parties worse over time. So big learnings around that.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of dilemma, being like when to say no to a client, and you know, when to push back. And yeah, it's a strange one. I would say though that, and this might help anyone that's listening as well, is that there's a lot of really, really helpful Webflow communities in the space. There's one called Flow Party, there's Floxy's design community, and there's FinSuite group as well. But essentially, a lot of questions can be answered by kind of the Webflow community at large. And I sometimes see people put quite difficult questions on Twitter and just kind of like hope for the best. And actually, I think if you can be in, you know, small like live streams with maybe 10, 15 people or so, which happen pretty constantly, you know, every week, there's some community holding some kind of talk with people who are really, really experienced. I really recommend bringing those types of questions there as well, because there is tons of support out there, but to try and do it in 140 characters is hard, I find.
Yeah, thank you, that's helpful. I'll look into those.
Yeah, they're really, really good, and the founders of them are really, really nice, experienced people. Okay, are you ready to now get into the nuts and bolts of this podcast, the failures?
Yes, let's go for it.
Okay, you don't sound too sure, but we're just going to dive straight in, all right? Tell me about failure number one, relying on your partner for feedback on your designs.
Yeah, so obviously I don't like putting work out there that I'm not proud of. And a big part of that is, I guess, the classic perfectionist traits. And when you're learning something and you can identify, this is not the work that I know I can do, but it's all I've got given my skill set at the moment, I didn't feel comfortable putting my work out there on the likes of social media and Twitter as something I'd never used before. So when I was learning design, I used courses through YouTube and I guess like Flux course and that kind of thing to give me the general idea of what I should be doing in terms of design and processes and that sort of thing. And when I would design something, creating my own little challenges, I did many different 30-day challenges that obviously weren't posted online. I'd ask my partner for feedback on what he thought, and this may paint him as not very nice, but he'd always say, oh, it doesn't look quite right, but couldn't actually give me the reason as to why it didn't look right. And I'd get frustrated and doubt my abilities, which then compounded the fact that I didn't want to put anything online. So eventually I got to a point of where I realized that no, I need to get feedback from other people who are designers and who may be able to provide more.
And I mean, like, this is an important point because I think a lot of people feel that they're not experienced enough to share their work. They're like, well, what's the point of me sharing my work? Like, I'm not good enough, or, they might just feel like they're too early in their journey to share their work. What advice would you give them? Because it sounds like it took you months to kind of gear yourself up to actually do it, and then you did it, and it wasn't that bad. In fact, it was really helpful.
Yeah, well, it took me from February's when I started learning design full-time through till I think November before I started actually posting work online. If I'm looking at somebody or talking to somebody who is in my position and has similar traits around perfectionism, I'd maybe cut that time in half. I think maybe, a few months in, after I've gotten the basics down, that's when I'd start posting work. But that's because I didn't want to be putting anything out there that's, less than average. But yeah, it's a lot less scary than I think you put it into your mind. Even posting the designs every day, I just became numb to it at some point, and it just became a part of my daily habits. And I didn't even think twice about it as I do it every day now.
It's like brushing your teeth.
Yeah. Although it does take more time than that, unfortunately.
But I mean, in terms of like, why, just out of interest, are you posting this same work on LinkedIn, on your Instagram? Like, are you kind of, okay, I'm going to make this one design and then I'm going to, put it into different formats, or how are you kind of approaching this?
So I've just been using Twitter since I started this design challenge, learning Twitter and also doing the daily challenge, and then, freelancing on top of that. I didn't want to spend more time learning how to use the other algorithms in terms of like Instagram and that sort of thing, and LinkedIn. And I think also there's a fear there of posting on those two platforms because I know that I know people on there. Whereas on Twitter, I knew absolutely nobody, and half my friends and family don't even know that I post on Twitter. So there was that, what's the word?
Anonymity.
Yeah, that was a massive part of it. It was less scary because I didn't know anyone and I wasn't going to get criticized by family and friends or judged. Whereas Instagram and LinkedIn are very much, everybody's watching what you're doing, and maybe they wouldn't say anything bad about them, but it's embarrassing sometimes, especially when you know the work's not what you're wanting to be doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's kind of like, I mean, one with the algorithms thing, I think it's not as easy to just create one piece of work and then just kind of throw it on different platforms and expect the same type of response. Whereas if you keep turning up every day to the same social media platform, it's a bit like turning up to the same room of coworkers every day. It's like, oh, hey guys, here's a bit of, here's another bit of design work that you've done, and you can create a depth of connection there. On Twitter, particularly, I find it's really, really powerful to be posting and commenting on other people's posts and stuff in comparison to other platforms, I found.
Absolutely.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then also with the friends thing, yeah, it's quite scary at the start to be like, I'm now doing this thing to your like people that, are like, see you maybe as a corporate finance person, and suddenly they're like, wait, what? No, you don't do that. And you're like, shut up, I'm trying to do this new thing. Whereas on Twitter, you can kind of be whoever you want to be, I guess, if you're starting out afresh.
That's so true. And ironically, when we came back from Barley after 6 months away, I had this new, I guess, personal identity that I was trying to embody as a designer and somebody who works online and is more focused on, aesthetics and lifestyle and creating cool things on the internet, coming home after having left as a corporate finance worker, it was a bit of a shock, I think, for family and friends. And I definitely struggled a wee bit with trying to break through their, what's the word?
Perceptions of you.
Yeah. I was definitely trying to push through what they thought of me. And yeah, it was tough. Moving overseas
It is weird.
Makes it easier.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I also think it's strange when you've gone away for 6 months. You've kind of become a new person to a certain extent, just by virtue of being away from whatever was normal to you is now, like, it's not normal. For the last 6 months, you haven't been doing what, your family and friends have been doing for the last 6 months, probably. And then to go back, not only with like, I've been away for 6 months and I'm a different person, but also professionally, I want something completely different from my life is quite an extreme change. And this is something that I've been talking to other people in the Webflow space about, like how they want to position themselves. Because, when someone says, what do you do? Do you say, well, I used to work in finance, but I'm currently trying to transition to UI UX design? Or are you like, I am a UI UX designer and I've set up a studio with my partner? How are you approaching that?
It took me probably a month or two into my design challenge before I would say that I was actually a designer. Before that, there was always a long-winded answer of, oh, I'm just left my job in corporate finance and I'm studying design at the moment, but, didn't have a clear answer or a clear sense of identity, I guess, around that. But now it's a lot easier to say I'm freelancing in web design. I can say it with more confidence. I guess there's evidence to prove it now.
Yeah. I mean, you've got, almost 100. You're on day 90, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on. Yeah, you're a designer now. You've done it. You've been posting more consistently than anyone I know in the space, which is incredible. And what I think is kind of fascinating about you, though, is that you don't seem to have a portfolio per se as much as a ton of work. Is that like, is Twitter your like living portfolio, or are you about to release a portfolio that has all of this work kind of combined onto one portfolio, or how are you thinking about that?
So I am delaying deciding my portfolio. I have every intention to design a portfolio. And with what happened with the design challenge is that within the first month, I was approached for freelance work. And, a few weeks after that, I was doing freelance work. So my days are quite structured in terms of time. And I spend an hour to half an hour to an hour and a half every day doing my design challenge. So my intentions post finishing this challenge is to allocate that time to designing my portfolio and getting it out there faster, because it's something I want to put a lot of effort and time into. And it was honestly too much to be able to do that alongside working and doing my daily challenge.
That's totally fair. I guess I just want to highlight this for anyone that's listening who's like, oh, I don't know how to get clients and stuff. Share your work. Show your work. Like, it's so powerful. It's crazy to me that you literally arrived on a new platform. You haven't been leveraging contacts. You haven't gone to a fancy design school. You haven't, worked for millions of agencies. You're literally you just turn up on a platform, start posting this design challenge, get a job within your first month. Like, it's just so crazy to me, this whole story. It's just like, what the hell? Like, did you see this coming at all? Or was it just like, what is happening to me? How is this working?
Yeah, there was definitely a bit of shock there. So the plan was to start a challenge, and then my partner was going to focus on the development studio. I would do my challenge and then at some point start reaching out for work or, offering to do free work, that kind of thing. So I had no idea that it was going to happen so quickly in terms of getting approached by people. I honestly didn't think my work was good enough and that people wouldn't see the potential in my, I guess, design skills as they were at the time. I didn't think that I'd have the success from it that I did. So yeah, it happened really quick and I was quite bewildered by it, I guess you could say. Pleasantly surprised, but it definitely boosted my confidence up a lot because it did give me that validation. It's like, okay, well, people think that what I can produce at least looks like I could be a designer.
The story is mental. Can you tell me about failure number 2? So starting a design and development studio with your partner and expecting things to fall into place and clients to walk in the door.
Yeah, so this was quite an interesting one. It was when we first got to Barley, we had the intentions of starting a business together at some point. It'd always been something we talked about. And him being a developer and me learning design, he already had an understanding of design. And between the two of us, we could definitely produce designs that are nice, tick the boxes in terms of conversions and that kind of thing. So the goal with that was I would take care of majority of the design work. He'd obviously mentor me and make sure that it was doing what it was supposed to be doing, and then he'd do the development work. So that was the plan. And then a month or so into it, we spent so much time on our website and got it all live and amped it up, the two of us, and ready for clients to pour in the door. And we hadn't marketed, we hadn't done anything towards it. So we went live and then crickets, nothing happened straight away. And a lot of long conversations happened, and we sort of had to figure out, it's like, is this actually what we want to be doing? Is this solving the right problems? And then from there, we kind of realized, it's like, I guess the initial goal was to do e-commerce. We realized that e-commerce is so intense and there's a lot of moving parts to it. That's not what we want to be doing to start off with, because these projects will last for months, and I'm not quite at a level yet of where I can take on enough of the design work that we're getting we couldn't deliver the service, I think, that we wanted to deliver with the skill sets that we were at. So we had to rejig that and kind of start from scratch again.
Okay, so you had this studio website, it was all ready to go, and then you were like, oh, there's no clients. And then you were like, but do we even want the clients, even if they did come through the door? And then you kind of went back to, you know what, I'm going to focus again on learning. You focus on freelancing, boyfriend. And then, you're going to carry on doing your freelance challenge or your daily challenge and then see what happens.
Yeah, so during that point, I still wasn't putting any work online. I was just self-teaching, completing courses and everything like that. So it was me just designing, getting feedback from him, and then him building out work. But at some point in there as well, he stopped freelancing and we were just both focused on the studio. So also wasn't as much money coming in, which was a massive mistake. So we got to a point of when we were making these decisions about what we should be doing in terms of the studio direction, and then that financial scarcity started to come in. So from there was a discussion about maybe I should freelance, but we also clung on to the idea of working for ourselves and not having to rely on other people and working together, so we had full flexibility. So it dictated a lot of the decisions that we were making. So I think it was in around September we decided to pivot the studio and him focus on what he was doing and me so focus on getting better at designing, so that I didn't have to, I guess I could take on more of the workload, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like, I mean, forgive me if this is a personal question, but when couples work together, that's tough. Was that kind of a stressful thing that maybe influenced the decision to not pursue doing this e-commerce studio together to the same extent that you were planning initially? Or kind of, because trying to create a portfolio website, one, is so difficult, but trying to create a portfolio website essentially with your loved one and then run a business together, like that's hard, I'd imagine.
Well, ironically, that was probably one of the easiest parts. So we'd worked together in the past. We met when we were really young. So we'd had jobs and we worked together for many, many years. So starting something together wasn't as much of a, I guess, difficulty as I thought it was going to be. With the design and development studio, obviously communication was fine with what we wanted. The biggest issue is that I didn't have enough knowledge to be able to support and pull my weight, if that makes sense. So I didn't have the ideas that were needed to run a studio, whereas he's got more of the ideas brain and that sort of thing. Whereas I'm more about processes and making sure things go smoothly, whereas we needed someone who was really good at design and could take care of that whole part of the business, whereas he could take care of all the development side of things. So I think the hardest part was the fact that in Bali, we were very much confined to just being the two of us. Like, we didn't really go out and try and meet lots of people. We put ourselves into a quite isolated environment so we could learn and progress and get better and smarter. And we were very closed off to other ideas from people because there wasn't many people within our network of who we could ask for feedback and advice, whereas we should have been asking for feedback and advice and actually being more aware of the mistakes we're making and decisions we're making, instead of just relying on the two of us, each other to bounce ideas off. So we just put ourselves in a bubble.
It's kind of like an echo chamber of like, this is a good idea, isn't it? Yeah, it's a great idea. It's like, well, you haven't kind of checked what the market says about your idea to a certain extent, or that makes a lot of sense. And so I think this leads us on nicely to failure number 3. So you pivoted the studio to be development only, but you personally gave up on designing. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so this was, we went back to New Zealand for a couple of months, and around the time of when, family was sort of watching what we're doing, questioning glances, like, are you guys going to succeed at this or fail? And, you worked in corporate finance. What are you doing trying to design? So I think there was a bit of, a lack of confidence there for myself during this point of time. And also it'd been a year since I stopped working, and Will hadn't been taking on many freelance projects. So there was a bit of financial scarcity here. So we're trying to figure out, hey, what needs to be done? See, figuring out how to make money in a way that's time efficient. And so we knew he could do that through development. And the idea was to be able to grow the studio as well. And to do that, bringing on more developers and that sort of thing. And then using my skill set as an account manager and managing people and teams and that sort of thing, leveraging those skills with growing the studio. So you realise then that I hate sales. It's a few meltdowns. So I'd given up design. I thought that, no, I'm not good enough. It's not what we need to be able to, solve the problems that we're facing at the moment. The money that I'd earn as a designer won't be enough to keep us afloat at the moment anyway. So why don't we just do development only? We'll just focus everything on the studio, growing it, use my skills there, instead of trying to learn a new skill like design and get better at that. So yeah, I think there was about 3 or 4 months where I wasn't designing at all, just stopped. And then at one point I realized, why did I stop? I miss it. Like, what am I doing working in this space, with like sales and outreaching to people? So that's not who I am. It felt very unnatural. Whereas sitting behind a computer and designing, that feels a lot more natural, which is nice.
Yeah, and that's when you then started the design challenge. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand now. Yeah, I think it's strange because I think as someone that's never freelanced before, and this is my experience, but it sounds like it might be similar for you, you think, oh, if I'm freelancing, I can live and work wherever I want. I can earn as much money as I want. There's no salary cap. I can, I can work on whatever projects I want to take on and stuff. And I think in reality, if you're at a certain, point in your career, I think all those things are true. I think you can earn really good money. I think you can work on whatever projects you want to work on to a certain extent. If you've got that many inbound requests for you to work on those projects, and I think you can, live quite freely. If you want to live in an expensive place, you can. If you want to live in a really cheap place, you can. You can travel and stuff. But getting to that place, which is what everyone wants to get to, means that it is really difficult. And I think we underestimate how difficult it is to get there, and the amount of different skill sets and hats you need to wear in order to do that successfully is what I've certainly found anyway. Not sure if that relates to you.
Absolutely. And money, like immediate money, was not the key driver for all of this. Obviously, pretty comfortable living frugally, not working for a year. We had to rein in living costs, and we'd have been saving for years beforehand with no exact goal of what we were saving for, but we had enough there to live comfortably. So there wasn't any lifestyle adjustments, which was really good. But it was more so what's going to get us to where we want to be in 5 years the fastest, and like what's more productive to be doing today to get us there. And that's when the conversation around the design challenge sort of started, because I mean, Will's got his own network of developers and that sort of thing, but myself not having a network was a massive, I guess, disadvantage. So that's when I decided, okay, I need to start growing my own network so that as my career in design evolves, that's something that I've always got and that can't be taken away. Whereas a job at an agency or studio can always be taken away. And again, I wasn't really driven by money, and I'm still not at the moment. I just want to be learning and getting better so that I can put work out there that I'm super proud of. And that's my main goal. And that's why freelancing is the best option at the moment, because it's allowing me to do the work and get the experience, which is something that you just can't do if you're not putting your work out there or doing something you don't like.
That makes sense. And I'm interested in this idea of networking in the design space specifically, like, because you've got a network from all your past work. And, you know, it sounds like what you're saying is, I don't have a network in the space that I want to be playing in, rather than you don't have a network whatsoever. Because whenever people say, I just don't have any contacts at all, it's like, you got a mum and dad, or, you know, you got brothers and sisters maybe, or, you know, like, I think everyone has a network that they can potentially reach out to and say, hey, I'm doing this. I'd love to help you out, do, you know, design and development if that's what you're interested in, and get their first projects from those first, you know, people that like them, know them, trust them in life.
Yeah, so I'm from like a very small rural area in New Zealand. My parents are farmers, so there wasn't going to be much of a network there that I could really utilize, I guess you could say. And maybe there's fear as well with my previous network about reaching in and coming out with this new identity as a designer and being told, you know, that's not who you are, why would I trust you? That kind of thing. Whereas I found it was easier to start from scratch in a space where I knew that the designers were there, and that's the people I'm trying to, you know, target, because I want feedback from people and I want to talk to people who are in positions that I want to get to. In New Zealand, there's like a massive tall poppy syndrome, they call it, whereas people who are trying to push ahead and do something different, others will just chop them down and stop you from growing. So Twitter allows me to avoid that in a way, even though there's plenty of New Zealanders out there. Whereas I think reaching out in New Zealand, I was so scared of that tall poppy syndrome that I haven't talked to really anybody in my previous network about what I'm doing before. Only my family and close friends know what I'm doing.
What? Okay, that's crazy to me. Okay, this whole idea of like being good enough, I think, is a fascinating topic. When do you think you will ever reach out to your network who know you as maybe someone else? And if so, when do you think you will do that? Like, what do you need to get to? Do you need to win a design award and then you're like, hey fuckers, I'm around? Like, how are you approaching this?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think maybe if I needed to, I'm hoping that I won't need to. In saying that, if a friend approached me and they had a design that needed to be done and wanted my feedback, of course I'd be so open to it. And I don't hide the fact that I post my work online or anything, but it's just so different to what my friends and family do. Like, they all work in quite stable jobs at home, and they don't really travel too much. So what Will and I are doing is so different that a lot of people who are in our lives can't actually relate. So maybe if what I was doing and the direction I was heading towards design started to relate to more parts of what they are doing in their lives, say if it was like an e-commerce store or a landing page of sorts for a business they were starting, then of course I'd be like so for putting my services towards them and helping them out. I think that's amazing to be able to do that for friends and family as well. But it hasn't been a time or place of where I felt like I would actually add value to a situation with the skills I've got. But I don't think I'll ever really feel like my work is good enough. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. But I've gotten to a point now where it's just done is better than perfect. Just having something out there is better than, not putting your work out at all.
If I may say, I've listened to a lot of successful people and all of them say, I can get better. And I look at them as experts. And you might think as an expert, they know stuff that you don't know, right? Like that's kind of, they have knowledge, wisdom, expertise and stuff. But in this space, I find that there's so much stuff that's happening all the time in terms of technological developments, Mid-Journey, ChatGPT, like Sora.ai, like there's so much stuff that's happening that means that experts you can't be an expert in everything in design and dev, and you have far more leverage and talent and knowledge than you might even realize. So all I'm saying is, when you're uber successful and you win that award, have a listen back to this podcast and then send it to your friends and family on LinkedIn, where you've got that gold badge, the LinkedIn gold badge. No, but as in, like, I just think it's important to be, aware of what you want to achieve, but also to look at how far you've come. That's my little speech at the end of this podcast. Are you ready for the most difficult question I'm about to ask you?
Yeah, sounds good.
You don't sound too sure whenever I ask you these questions. You're like, yep, sounds good.
Yeah, I'm ready for
it. Okay, Erin, what is your next failure going to be?
My next failure is going to be, there's going to be so many failures coming up because I'm just getting started. The next failure will probably be taking on work for maybe the wrong reasons. Maybe I'll want the money more than I like the design of things. Maybe I'll be too picky and miss out on opportunities. I can't say exactly how I think it's going to look, but I think wanting to take on everything in terms of projects, because that's how you learn, and being closed off to other opportunities. Yeah, I don't know. That is a really hard question.
I mean, it is a weird question, isn't it? Because you're like, hold on, how can I even predict the failure? I want to avoid failures. Like, why would I know what my next failure is going to be? I'd just avoid it so that it's not a failure. But I think it's an interesting question to explore, like what you're currently struggling with or what you anticipate being a struggle, and maybe taking a bump in the road, should we say.
Yeah.
But
there's going to be
I have a lot of confidence in you.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, you've got the design work you've done. If anyone has got to the end of this episode and still hasn't checked out Erin's Twitter, go and check it out. There is so much beautiful work there. I feel like your portfolio is going to wrap that up in a nice bow. You've got this beautiful, like, photography and minimalist design aesthetic. You've got a lot of large serif fonts, sans serif fonts, but just these big headers. You've got a really clear design style, and I think that's going to really push you forward. And then you've got a developer that sleeps next to you.
Yeah,
I mean, pretty handy, right?
Oh, super handy. That's why I'm really excited for the portfolio, because not only is it a way for me to showcase what the design is that I want to be doing, but also he's learning more so like the animation space. So it's going to be quite a cool project once it's there. But I just need to get through the next 10 days, and then I'm really starting to invest more time into it, which just sounds like such a cop-out, because I feel like everybody procrastinates their portfolios. And I swear I'm not doing that. I just don't have the time at the moment.
Hey, I think it's totally fair that you haven't yet done it because you're too busy building your portfolio pieces,
yes,
in my opinion, to actually create the portfolio and make it look absolutely insane. You're also gathering tons of inspiration probably from every single site you're looking at for inspiration to actually make your portfolio pieces. So yeah, I'd say it's a pretty good use of time.
Hopefully. I don't think it will take me too long, hopefully. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Attracting more opportunities through it as well will be quite cool. Yeah.
Oh, so much is going to come. I'm super excited for you. And Storefront.design as well. There's, oh my God, so much opportunity there. I feel like you are going to fly if you get that going at the same time. So super excited. I wasn't trying to trip you up at the end of this podcast with, what's your next failure going to be? It was more just...
I was expecting it, but honestly, I don't know, because I know that there's going to be so many. And it's quite scary because like even if you verbalize those potential failures, you don't want to like manifest that's going to happen. And that's quite scary because you're like, oh, maybe it's going to be that, you know, like insecurities might come through, like, oh, maybe I'm just not good enough for a project and I get kicked off it, or maybe I get given a project and I'm not clear enough that of where I'm at in terms of skill sets, that I disappoint somebody. So there's all these potential failures that could happen that, yeah, I don't know which one could happen next, but I hope none of them. I really hope none of them.
Or maybe all of them, you're going to learn from them, and
Yeah.
they are going to make you a better designer in the casserole of life as a freelancer or studio co-founder. Who knows? Let's see where it goes. Erin, you have been an excellent guest. You've shared incredibly vulnerably, even though you're kind of ill today. It's amazing that you've said as much as you have. You've shared amazing insights. For anyone that's at the start of their design journey, I just think this 100-day challenge is so powerful. And I think you're kind of an example of why you should share your work more. So thank you for doing what you've done.
Thank you for having me again. It's been really nice to talk about this sort of stuff with someone else.
I'm glad. Yeah, I mean, I guess you're talking about this journey to your boyfriend the whole time, but I'm just this random English guy who's just asking you intrusive questions. So thanks for telling me all the stuff you have.
Well, I hope it helps somebody else, because one of the things I've noticed a lot lately has been people starting design challenges and getting like 2 or 3 days in and then stopping. And I'm super fascinated by that because I get messages all the time from people saying, you've inspired me and I've started this challenge. And then I check a few days later and they've stopped. And I don't know why that happens. I'm like, surely you can't be that inspired if you stopped. So I don't know what people are expecting from these challenges, but looking at it more as so a challenge to yourself to stick to something for 30 days, maybe that's a better approach, not necessarily having any clear goals, because you're not getting disappointed within 3 days if you're not gaining 50 followers. I was lucky that happened, but looking for other ways to measure success from it instead of just follower count.
Yeah, like process-based goals rather than outcome-based goals. Sounds like a very healthy approach to take. Let's wrap it up there. Great last little nugget for us to end on. So thanks so much for sharing that.
That's all right.